Hello, Elixir community. I am getting close to finishing up the 0.2.0 version of my ExTerm library, which I will be releasing this coming week. So I thought I would show it off a little bit. It pretty much looks the same as the 0.1.0 version, but a lot of the bugs have been fixed, and the entire thing has been completely re-architected, at least in the back end. So let's take a look. So as before, you get a IEX terminal when you reach the page, and you can run whatever command you want. So for example, that would give you that, and io.puts hi mom will do that. Note that the terminal is colored as you would expect. With the highlighted colors depending on the type of the data, and moreover, you can use ANSI command codes to make your I/O content have color. Another thing that works quite well is if you use the up arrow, we get history on the previous things that we've run. And so that's another feature that I didn't have before. And also we can do tab completions and get finish up the content for whatever we're typing in the terminal at the time. And of course, if we scroll down, we can see what was happening before in the terminal. So under the hood, how does this work? Let's take a quick look at the developer console. So that's here. And if we take a peek at what is inside, we can see this is the a Phoenix Live View div. And then inside here, we have an ExTerm terminal div. And inside this, we have an ExTerm console div. So this ExTerm terminal div wraps around a few important things, namely this anchor, which is what allows us to do the scroll. And this ExTerm console bit is all of the data. And you can see when I open it up, it takes a little bit of time because there's obviously a lot of cells. And for each cell in the console, you can see that there is a single span that represents that cell. And when you go down to something like further down that has some color to it, so let's see, this might take a little bit to get to. Row 3, item number 1, here we go. You can see that here we have styling that causes it to be yellow. This styling is generated as a result of the IO ANSI code, and so it's able to set the style for each of these cells. And so that's basically how it works on the front end side. Let's take a look a little bit at the back end side. So in short, the way this works is we have in the main rendering for the terminal live view, we have this console.render, which basically punts the rendering of the console to a Phoenix Live component, and that Phoenix Live component is in the ExTerm console module. This itself has this item called cell.render. So each cell is rendered by the cell module, but here you can see our phx update append, which is what allows us to which allows us to not have to store every single cell in the live view itself. Instead, what happens is that these cells are stored in the front end. And there's also here is our new live view 0.18 for directive, which tells us to wrap this element in a for loop. Let's take a quick look at the cell. The cell itself is actually a little bit more of a big deal, and there's a lot of stuff where we have to go around and handle end of line cases and the cases where we don't have any content in the cell. But in any case, it just creates this span that we saw before. And you can check out this code if you're interested in understanding exactly what's going on. One more thing that I want to show you is that the system itself doesn't completely throw away the contents of the console. So the key item is that each of these Phoenix Live views subscribes to a channel that corresponds to the console that it's running. And that console will send these update messages here. And you can see it handling the update information. And when we get this update message, we go ahead and we fetch this update from this variable called console. And what console is a reference to an ETS table. And the ETS table can be either protected, private, or public. And in any case, what this will do is this gives us like a fast path to access these data, and also the data is mutable. So for example, if I do something where I go back and write over a previous line, then it's able to like very rapidly mutate the contents of the console and just send a single message, this update message, which is a very compact representation of which cells have changed. So it knows, it has an understanding of what constitutes a line changing, what constitutes a single cell changing, and what constitutes an entire section of the console changing. And what it's able to do is it's able to compactly generate a message that then gets turned into this update.get call, and then that message then creates a very efficient ETS table lookup, which will deliver content to our cells, which is a temporary assign, and then all of those cells that have been changed then make their way up into the live view, and we only make a diff based on what content inside the console has changed. And that's why the interface is much snappier in 0.2.0 versus 0.1.0. I've taken a lot of effort to get that right. So one more thing that I want to show you is I have a file here called IOServer. And let's take a quick look at this. What this is it's a wrapper that implements something that corresponds to Robert Verding's IO protocol. So here we can see a link to Robert Verding's IO protocol, and I'll put that in the comments of the video. And what's actually kind of surprising to me is I couldn't find anywhere in the Erlang standard library a module which takes Robert Verding's IO protocol and turns it into a behavior. That's probably because most of the messaging that happens, most of the protocol actually deals with messages and not function callbacks. So it doesn't really work as a behavior. But I thought it would be useful to actually turn it into a behavior. And so here I've defined this ExTerm.IOServer behavior. And what I do is I define a series of callbacks: handle put, handle get, handle setops, handle getops, handle geometry, handle request, and handle message. And these callbacks correspond to the different types of messages that you can receive as part of Robert Verding's IO protocol. And so I'm thinking maybe I want to open source, or not open source, all of ExTerm is going to be open source as it is, but break this out into its own library and if people are interested or think that they might know somebody who's interested in having a separate IOServer library that encapsulates this change, these sorts of callbacks, and sort of the basic code to convert these IO protocol messages into those callbacks. That's something that I'm interested in doing, and what I'll do is I'll make a poll on Twitter, and if you are interested in seeing this get turned into its own separate library outside of ExTerm, let me know. And yeah, I'll put a link to that below as well. Okay, so what's left? There's a lot of tests that I need to finish. I want to set up a CI pipeline. There's one bit of functionality that I still haven't implemented, and that's the clear function. So that's what happens when you spin up an Elixir IEX terminal and then you type clear. It basically resets the screen and then starts your prompt at the top. Documentation and guides, still a lot of work to go there, but I do believe that this is something that I can finish by the midweek. So that's what's next for ExTerm, and I will definitely make an announcement about the new ExTerm 0.2.0, and it'll be ready, and hopefully people who want to play around with it will get a chance to use it. Okay, so I would like to thank my new recurring GitHub sponsors, Paulo Gonzalez, Felipe Cabaco, Henning Dahlheim, and Wojtek Mach, and of course our recurring sponsor from before, Divik. So these are all people who have been gracious enough to contribute to my crazy programming adventures. I do have some plans for version 0.3.0, which I will work on immediately if I get $100 in monthly recurring GitHub sponsors, or whenever I finish up with the next library that I'm going to work on. So if you want to see the following features come sooner than later, chip in and tell other people to chip in. So here are the features that are going to make it into 0.3.0. Support for scroll pinning in Safari. So as it turns out, scroll pinning only works in Chrome and Firefox, and I'd like to see that also work in Safari. Support for prompt-aware tab completion. So currently, when you do a tab completion, it only gives you generic tab completions. This is also the case for Under the Hood, which is the exterm.js based terminal. Support for live view local backends. So if you want to have a different backend that isn't IEX, that is actually currently supported in this. You can write a task that will just run in an infinite loop. And if that task has io.puts or io.gets, those IO interactions will be forwarded to the terminal in lieu of IEX. So, for example, you could write a console-based text adventure game, and I think that's a really interesting use case that I think some people say they might want to do, and so. One aspect is perhaps you don't want to spin up another process and you just want the console-based text code to live inside of your live view and just be triggered by your live view. That's what I want. That's a use case that I want to support. I do also want to show you something that I'm really interested in. And this is to show you what Elixir history could look like. So currently, the way that history works in ExTerm is exactly the same as how it works in IEX, more or less. So let's just take a quick look at what I mean by this. So if I start writing something that takes more than one line, and I want to go ahead and edit that and change what I wanted to do, I have to do each line separately. and then I can have the new code update. So that's kind of inconvenient. And to show you what it could be, I'm going to call upon Julia, which is a different programming language that has really done a great job of figuring this out. So let's do function f, and then return 10. Okay, so this will, of course, just return 10. But suppose I want to go and change that to something like 40. Well, I can actually wind up doing a multi-line edit here, and then I'm going to make that 40. And then now f returns 40 instead of 10. And not having to scroll through the multiple lines and be able to actually edit the multi-line input, I think is a huge quality of life improvement that Julia is clearly able to do. And I think I know how to do it in Elixir. And so with the Elixir version of ExTerm 0.3.0, I will make that an optional feature if I can figure out how to do it. And so that's what I'll be working on in 0.3.0. I'll also be, with 0.3.0, I'll also be looking for beta testers for a pro version of ExTerm. And the pro version will have the following features. And by the way, when I say pro, I really do mean that this is something that I think mostly will help people working in teams instead of people who are just making individual projects. So the following features are going to be supported. One, I'll have a multiplayer console. So that means that you can share a single link and have two people be able to use the terminal at the same time. And there will be a callout. So when you have control of the terminal, your terminal will show up with a yellow border. And if you don't have control of the terminal, that yellow border will disappear. And finally, there will also be provenance tracking. So that means that if you access the console, there will be a uniform way of saving that information either to disk or to a database, or maybe to like S3 or some other resource. And basically what that means is that when you use it, suppose you run a set of commands, and then you log out, it'll automatically be chucked into your persistent storage of choice. And you can maybe think of this as a security feature. I don't think that it's really a super robust security feature because it's going to be easy to circumvent if you really know what you're doing, or maybe moderately tricky, but not impossible to circumvent if you know what you're doing. But what it will really be useful for is if you are ever jumping into the console to do some sort of emergency operation and something goes horribly wrong, then you'll have a log of everything that happened, and you'll be able to really trace back, hey, these were the steps that I did. Let's just make sure that I didn't screw anything up when I went in and used the console in anger. And I think that will be a useful tool for people who might want to deploy this in prod even. Okay, so what's this next library that I'm working on? I will be working on a long-awaited OpenAPI 3.1 router generator. So this router generator will read an OpenAPI JSON or YAML file and produce a Phoenix router based on that file. So there are certainly OpenAPI libraries for Elixir out there in the wild which will do something similar. But in my opinion, they're really more geared to the use case where you've got a tightly coupled front-end team as the primary consumer of your API. The most popular library basically makes it easy to have a fragile API interface where if you make a change to your code, you're really incentivized to just like make rapid changes to your code, and it's hard to track what changes have happened and what versions of your schema they correspond to. By requiring a API to be generated in full in the beginning, the advantage to this is that you're really kind of setting your API in stone. And when you need to bump the version of the API, then you are having a single monolithic document that your consumers can consume and apply the changes. And also with this library, it'll be possible to route to either version and share code between the two versions. So your controller code between the two versions fairly easily. So that's kind of what I'm targeting. I think this is a really good use case for when your OpenAPI consumer is either part of a decoupled team or like a third party who isn't even part of your team at all. That's less supported in Elixir ecosystem currently. So if you know companies that might really be interested in using this technology, have them contact me either on Twitter or here on YouTube, and I would love to talk to them. I already have one team that is interested in using this, so I'm excited. Great. So that is an update on ExTerm and a little bit of what's coming next. And I will see you around.